I'm David McBurnett, and mainly known for being a producer of music television, but have also worked in the festival business and the promotion business and all ends of production. I've also done a lot of computer work. I worked for the federal government running the Census Bureau in 2000, which was a real interesting job for me. It was like, well, I've never done this, and I got more respect for federal bureaucrats than I had before, because it's not easy.
That's interesting.
And that's it. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut. I was born in Washington, D.C., grew up in Connecticut. So don't tell anybody I'm a Connecticut Yankee. I was a long time ago.
We accept you.
And, I was a protege on piano from 5 to 12, and then my house ruptured. It never was very stable, and then it went to hell. And I got shipped off to a boarding school for a couple of years and finally quit that and became a hippie and a musician and a few other trades that I won't mention.
Sure.
And I've always been into music. I stopped playing piano. Psychologically, it was part of the rupture. I do play guitar. I don't play it well, but I play it and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I got involved quickly in the music scene in Boston. My brother's roommate at Harvard was a guy named Andy Pratt. So I was carrying amps for him and setting up, learning how to wrap cables, all that good stuff. And ended up doing a lot of work with another band called Cloud, which Otis Spahn, Muddy Waters piano player, was their mentor. And time went on, and I did a lot of stuff. And actually got Andy his first contract with Columbia Records, which was interesting. And he's what you call a one-hit wonder. Avenging Annie was his big song,
Gotcha.
And it's a good song, but he was unfortunately a one-hit wonder.
Yeah. When you were growing up, was there a lot of music in your household? How did you come to play piano?
Well, we had one, and my brothers tried. They weren't into it. My mother played, but she ended up with arthritis. And I was reaching the thing when I could reach it. And it would just felt right to me. I got an electric piano in the next room that I look at and play once in a while. But,
sure.
It's one of those things. I dragged around the Steinway for years and didn't play it. But it's in my DNA, and once you learn a piano, you understand a lot more about music, because of the construction of it and the music theory.
Yeah. So
that was fortunate for me because in fact, one of the tunes I played when I was young was The Professor Gives Out. It was Boogie Woogie. I played Bach and I played Beethoven and Rockmiller and all those characters. But my teacher also taught me Boogie Woogie. And Professor Gives Out was written by Roeland Byrd, which I didn't really realize that was Professor Longhair until I was down here for a few years.
Gotcha.
So, and I always liked that. So anyway, long story short, I left home at 16, went to Cambridge and did all the Cambridge and California stuff. And I met a cat in Connecticut who was in Rhinoceros, the band Rhinoceros, which was a put-together supergroup. And he and I formed a traveling musical commune and came to New Orleans. We were the Mud People, Papa Dukie and the Mud People, which...
So wait a minute. You are in Connecticut, he's in California, and y'all...
No. He was in Connecticut.
Okay, he was in Connecticut with you.
And we met up and we became buds and decided it was a good idea at the time. So we bought a couple of school buses and painted them white, built beds and stuff on the inside, and had a traveling musical commune.
Really?
We came down here and put shows on out in the Battery out in Wallace, Louisiana. In fact, Tommy Malone wrote a song about us.
Cool.
And Tommy flipped him out. I said, Tommy, my Mud People. He says, you're what? I said, oh, yeah. And Davey knows about us, but he had already moved away. Davey Malone, we were buds a long time. The Radiators kept, but Tommy is really super talented. And that's what got me here. And like many people, I came here for a couple months and stayed. Never really left.
How did y'all arrive at down here? You said, where'd y'all go?
The Battery is between the levee and the river. His family, Duke Edwards, is not the Edwards family, he's a black guy. His family were free Ethiopians that were brought here to supervise the plantation blacks. And they worked for land and money. And they ended up with like a bunch of square miles of land on the Mississippi River that now they still have a bunch of it. They lost the Civil War and they got it back. And they still lease till Demonte and those people. It's very fertile ground. And they have a couple lanes there in Wallace, Louisiana.
In Wallace, okay.
Yeah, and and that was my introduction to a lot of things. I mean, we were there, and Duke was like what you call a prince, the next up and coming guy, in this very cool Ethiopian heritage family, right? And we're there a month or something, and I go to a Black Baptist wake, right? And this is a Connecticut Yankee, right? And we're sitting in the back. I'm the only white person in the joint. And that's where I saw where a lot of our music comes from. This 70-year-old lady, I'm 72, right? Get up and dance with me, Jesus. Open casket. I'm going, Duke kept coming over and shutting my chin because it was like,
Yeah.
But it was great. I mean, I heard those rhythms. I heard those chanting. I heard the call and repeat.
Sure.
Right there in person. And just, I can see those images and hear that music right now. I mean, it was
It stuck with you.
very powerful for me to understand that. If you haven't experienced Black Baptist music down here, you just don't know that side of it. There's a great. I suggest to anybody. It's a great documentary called Rumble, about the influence of American Indians on blues and rock and roll. And I'm a musicologist. I'm acclaimed as that. I've made shows for HBO and Family Channel, and I thought I knew everything. Well, about 5 years ago when the book came out, how the world made New Orleans from Conga Square to Spanish doubloon to Conga Square, right? About the whole Latin influence. I used to think it was Miami, New Orleans, but it's not. It's New Orleans, Havana. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole undercurrent, and the first opera was here and all that stuff. So I'll go along my merry way. Now I know more, right? And then Rumble comes out. It's really a primary character is a guy named Link Ray, who nobody knows about unless you're a guitar player, and then you know who that is. Man who invented the power chord.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the only instrumental song ever banned from the radio. Because they thought it would start rumbles. This was like in a gang thing and West Side Story and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And an incredible play, but it takes you all back. Ivan's in it. Ivan Neville, because there's a lot of Indian blood in the Neville family.
Uh-huh.
I have Indian blood. I have Cherokee blood, but they have a lot more blood than I do. And it's like Robbie Robertson says. He's in it a lot. Is that? He says, if you're, be proud to be an Indian, be careful who you tell, especially if you're full blood. But he says, the blacks, they ran away from the plantations, and the Indians were like, well, they don't like us very much too, so come on in here or hang with us. And
right. Pretty
soon there's black Indians running around, and
Sure.
And there's a statistic about if you're been in this country, pre-Civil War, your African heritage has a lot of Indian blood in it. That was happening.
Sure.
So, and the whole blues. You listen to the Indians recording when government was recording Indians, and you hear Charlie Patton's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who most musicologists would agree was like the father of the Delta blues, right?
Okay.
He begat Muddy Waters,
Right.
Who begat Howlin' Wolf, all that incredible music. And you hear the rhythm and you hear the tonality, and it's Indian.
Yeah.
The old American Indian chants, Sorry about that. I'll call you back, buddy. Yeah.
Is there something that you learned in all of this or about all of this before you arrived here? Had you any prior knowledge of any of these things?
No. Not really. Like I said, I played Professor Gives Out, Boogie Woogie.
Sure.
I had knowledge of jazz. My oldest brother, who's like almost 7 or 8 years older than me, he bought Time Out, Take 5, I'm sorry, Dave Brubeck.
Yeah.
So I listened to Brubeck from a young age, and it's still one of my favorite, actually the most popular jazz album ever done, right?
Yeah.
And it's still a great record to this day, you know. So I was aware of that. I was aware of the blues from Otis Spann, right? And the blues were in Boston, had a pretty good music scene. But I wasn't really connecting that to New Orleans. I just knew blues, you know, was Chicago, Memphis, you know, you just figured that, you know, being fairly ignorant and young. But I know that I loved it, right? I didn't know that it was from here, you know.
Did it, how did you arrive at Wallace?
Oh, well, his family owned land.
Okay.
And that's where we could camp.
Okay.
We put a big platform up, and we had these big army tents that we'd bought.
Wow. Okay.
And so we squatted there, basically, but with
Gotcha.
permission of the landowners.
Yeah.
I mean, they have rights between the battery and the river, but they can't, like, build any permanent structure and stuff. You know, that's like, because when the river comes up, that's gone. You know,
Right.
so,
Got to be more.
but that's why we ended up there.
Yeah.
You know?
And you said that when you went to the Baptist church, you were alone, right?
I was with Duke.
Okay.
I was with the grandson of the woman who died.
You weren't with anyone that you had come down with?
Yeah, Duke Edwards, the guy who formed the Mud People.
Oh, okay.
He's the one who took me to it. It was his grandmother.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
All right.
there's like 200 direct descendants. You know, it's like wild, you know. It was
Yeah.
a real privilege to be there.
Sure.
You would have gotten there just trying to walk in. It would have been like, no.
Yeah.
You know, you would go, okay, you know. But no, I was with Duke, so whatever was fine. You know?
Sure.
And we sat in the back anyway, you know, so. But yeah, that's how I got there. And he was a great lesson in the music here because he was really schooled in it. He lectured, going to the Navy, and then he was, I forget whether it was Berkeley, New England Conservatory, and he was major jazz drummer in New York and Montreal.
What was his full name?
Duke Edwards.
Edwards. Okay.
And he was actually, I think, number 2 to Alvin Jones and the Playboy Poles as jazz drummers and stuff. But he could play rock, he could play jazz, he could play anything.
Yeah.
So that was how I got here. And now we ended up in Wallace, Louisiana, which I still have a warm place in my heart.
I'm sure.
Then I got to New Orleans, you know, and New Orleans was, as my friend Dana Kurtz says, you know, she says she lived in New York and couldn't get around, she'd get lost, and it's a grid, you know.
Right?
She got here and she could get around. And she said, well, I lived here before and it was good. I said, yeah, me too, Dana. You
That's
know.
funny.
Because I walked the French Quarter streets and I, you know, probably was here with a sword on. You know, I mean, it was, you know, I'm very much attuned to my heritage and my ancestors.
Yeah.
You know.
Learning what you learned and that experience at the wake, did it change your direction? Because at the time you were living and performing with a commune. It wasn't as if y'all had like a precise goal or pursuit in mind, I would imagine.
No, we didn't have, we were had some pipe dream of recording. Duke had gotten a buy from Warner Brothers that if we created something, they would get first dibs on it.
Cool.
But that commune kind of disintegrated, you know.
Sure.
Because it really wasn't, it was just time for it to disintegrate. It was a positive thing that lasted for a while, then stopped,
Sure.
you know. I faded away from it, and I ended up living here in New Orleans. And it was just, it's just really how we got here. Now, Duke was here. He stayed here for a long time. He was in and out here to California and back. He was very instrumental with Louis Armstrong's foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a lot of stuff for film and other stuff, you know, toward the end of it, all through his life. He died 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Quite a character and a very positive effect on me. But when I got here, once I got attuned to the city, I had a neat girlfriend named Angelica. If you know who that is, you'll know her real name. I ain't going to say it. And we were talking yesterday on Facebook about, I put up a picture of early jazz festival when it was 2x4s and canvas on the stages, right? And she said, "Did you go to the first fairs at the Coca Square?" And I said, "Yeah, you took me." I don't know if it was the first or second one. She said her memory's so bad she couldn't figure it out either.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm in that boat. Yeah, for sure.
But I was there. You know,
Yeah.
I was there one of them, and I was there the first year we put the festival at the fairgrounds. We used a third of the fairgrounds, and we were never going to use the whole thing. You know,
Yeah.
and for years I got away with a camper on the infield, and I know Quint for 50-something years, and We had a great time. I still have a great time at Jazz Festival. People say, "Oh, the old days." I said, "Yeah, the old days are great. It's great now if you know what you're doing and come for the right reasons." You know, I
Sure.
mean, Jazz Festival is interesting. It's not like a lot of concerts you go to where you got the people there with their phones talking to their friends about how great it is, not listening to the music. Jazz Festival, people tend to pay attention.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
You know, some of the swells up in the Grand Marshal, not so much, but we throw things at them. You know, so
Sure.
but,
Yeah, that was definitely a direction you and I were going to move into because you were heavily involved in the AV production side of things, and I wanted everybody to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I'd been involved in a club business in the 70s. That's really where this comes in. And I became friends with a character named Jed Palmer, who people have many different feelings about, but you can ask Quint Davis, you can ask Art Neville when he was alive, you know. Jed Palmer was a character. He owned Jed's University Inn on Maple Street. Then he opened up Jed's on Oak Street, right across from Maple Leaf.
Okay.
Right? In fact, we had music all the time. Maple Leaf had sometimes. And we used to pass bad 20s back and forth at 4 o'clock in the morning because the bartenders were drunk too, and they'd take, you know, it was fun times back then. And it was, and that's where I got a serious music education and a business education because Jed knew his stuff, you know. I mean, we had the Radiators. I mean, they were the Rhapsodizers and played there, right? And then the Neville Brothers' first gig was there, right?
Wow.
And Tom Waits would come to town. That's where I met Jesse and became friends with Jesse Winchester. When he got amnesty and he could come and play, he just blew us up. He was so good, you know. He was, you know, I miss that man. He became a good friend, and he died a few years back, and he just one of the sweetest hearts I've ever met, you know, an incredible songwriter and performer. He had a great line for songwriters, which was, say what you got to say, but don't say any more.
Sure.
You know, and if you listen to his music, you know, I'm pleased to play his songs at parties and stuff. And Buffett covered a lot of his songs, you know. And Buffett was a great follower of Jesse, you know, because Jesse was that good a songwriter.
Sure.
You know, and sweet man. But that's, I got involved with the festival, you know, and also Jed's, the music here. And Jed's was just a place for music. I mean, that's where Professor Longhair played before Tipitina's got open. I mean, that's where McCartney came crashing through our back door to come listen to Professor Longhair, right? It's where everybody would come after the big shows was over. At 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, it could be anybody from, you know, Willie Nelson to Paul McCartney, to Springsteen. It didn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
Because where do you go late night? Well, we were the place, you know. Unless you want to go to Bourbon Street, and you really want to go to Bourbon Street, you know. Now, but on Bourbon Street, when I was first here with Angelica, she took me to the Ivanhoe. And I'd been to Club 47 in Boston with the Chambers Brothers doing Time live, which was, you know, if you know the song, it's like a 10-minute song, Time, and it's quite a spiritual event, to say the least. And here I am with the Meters learning how to get their chops. And that's, they played the Ivanhoe, and they were the Meters. And to me, one of the best groups, if not the best group that ever came out of this town. You know,
Yeah.
they had their own internal problems. I know that because I reunited them in 1980. It's a good show, but they were suing their publisher at the time, and there were some other complications. But the Nevilles were the opening act, and we shot that too, and that got them their first record contract.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But the Meters were the Meters. I mean, they just, and you know, they were poor, you know, in all that time. And then when sampling started, all of a sudden they got healthy.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
before then, George was laying carpet, for Christ's sakes, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Jed's was your introduction to music business.
Yeah.
And what effect did this have on any particular direction you felt like you were headed in at the time? Because that's a different side of music that doesn't involve passion so much as it does promotion and the mechanics, you know?
Well, for me, it was the passion. Because there's too many people in the business who didn't care about the music, right?
At that time?
Yeah. At that time, there was more people cared about the music, but it disintegrated over time. But there's still people today who are quite famous who very care about the music. Win Davis, for instance, you know, and a lot of people associated with that festival, right, really care about the music.
I didn't hear the name, I'm sorry.
Huh?
I didn't hear the name.
Well, Quint and other people associated with them, you know.
Gotcha.
There's Reggie Toussaint, there's Bad Andy, there's, you know, a lot of production people. I'm not that familiar with the generations now, you know. I'm an old school guy, you know. I'm 72 years old, soon to be 73. And happily, you know what I mean? No, I lived this long, it's pretty cool.
Right.
But that festival between Jed's and that festival, and then there was other festivals I helped with, the one out on the Atchafalaya River, oh God, Celebration of Life or something in 71 or 2 or 3 like that. It's kind of foggy back then. And Bonnie Delaney were playing, and there's the other group, they did White Bird, and the Dolphins song, which I always thought was their song until I lived in Coconut Grove and found out it was Fred Neil, who was a very famous singer-songwriter, you know, who hit the big time and walked away from it, which was interesting. I started to see that. And you could see, like Tom Waits. Tom Waits is, you know, there's a lot of musical geniuses in this town. I don't overuse the term.
Sure.
Because I did produce Ray Charles, who is certifiably a musical genius, right?
Sure.
But I would look at Dave Bartholomew and say the same thing,
Yeah.
you know. And it's, you know, Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, that was my first big national show, was Fats Domino, Ray Charles, Jerry Lee Lewis. Paul Shaver's my music director. I had Ronnie Wood on a side guitar. I had Smokey Johnson playing with Fats, and then I have Steve Jordan playing with the band I put together. I was kidding them, man. We can make some money if you guys want to go on the road, you know.
Yeah.
You know? But, you know, that was the accumulation of my knowledge then, you know. And I knew it's always was the thing. I guess I even, I don't know if it was before I got here or soon there. I know it was after I got here. But I'm looking at, you know, Joan Baez, Dr. John, a few of them didn't have record contracts and they're promoting bubblegum music, you know, and I'm like, there's something wrong with this picture.
Well, I mean, we both know where that comes from, and it's not from the artist, you know.
No. Although sometimes the artists help perpetuate that. When you go on tour and you got to carry a string man and a hairdresser and 2 roadies for your gear, you know, the cost goes up, and
Sure.
that's why it's so high. And it's like people bitch about the jazz festival price. I'm like, have you bought the arena tickets recently? You know,
It's all out of control, in my opinion. It's really
which is why I love the club.
disheartening.
Which
sure.
is, I mean, the series that I'm developing right now is to be shot in clubs. It's going to be shot in tips. You know, they don't know it yet, but it will be, because I'm hard to say no to when I'm doing Chikiwawa. There's some great outdoor locations. There's other clubs that are in the mix but I've shot a lot of stuff, so I'll just executive produce this one. But, you know, I know the vision that I want, and I know what I need, and you got to be able to have a truck. I used to roll like 2 semis. Now I don't need a semi. Everything's gotten smaller, you know.
Yeah, I wanted to
I used to have a
ask you-
$300,000 Kagami. Now I have a $10,000 Sony. It's better. you know,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, things have definitely changed
Yeah.
technology-wise.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, that's a sharp turn from kind of learning. I guess you were involved in booking and the day-to-days of the bar
Yeah.
when you were working at Jed's, but then when you moved to production for Jazz Fest, I mean, that's a big leap.
I was a consultant to them. I didn't really run their productions, but I still understood the finances of it. Right. And one of the arguments we had, I wanted to cap it at 50,000. You know, and I wasn't in favor of the big artists coming in, and you know, much. I mean, yeah, Bonnie, sure, people really connected to New Orleans. You know, Marcia Ball is New Orleans, so she didn't count. You know, she's here. She's one of us.
I
you
get
know?
it.
But it's not my show, you know, and I appreciate what the Jazz Festival has done. I mean, it's an amazing show. I mean, Was it 11 stages now? I mean, you know, it's the biggest smorgasbord of music in the world.
Yeah.
Now, if you come here for the big acts, cool. That's all paying for everybody else. You know? Because it's go to the Lanyap stage. I won't tell you my favorite one because they're getting crowded already, but there's a couple people who only play then. And one of them is the Midnight Disturbers, if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah.
I mean, my godson turned me on to that a long time ago. I was like, wow, how come I don't know about this, you know? And Charlie Steiner, who's the head for video at OZ, I turned him on to it, and he was like, how come I don't know about this? I said, I didn't know about it either, you know? So,
Sure.
There's so many things. Go to the Lanyap stage. Go to the small stages. Just walk around and listen. You know, it's the heritage stuff. You know, it's... and that's the thing I love about this city is also the thing that's really important about New Orleans is the generosity of the musicians. Mm-hmm. And to tell you an example, one of my dear friends, Carmela Raposo, great jazz singer, right? And she's playing, it was like right around time of the French Quarter Fest, and she's playing at this art gallery on Royal Street that had like glass windows and doors in front, and then French doors down the side, which were open. It was a beautiful day, right? And she's playing with her trio of some great musicians, right? And this dude walks by, and he's got a cello on his back, right? And he looks in, and she's like, you want to come play? He's like, sure. He comes in, the guy's world-class cello player, and he's been playing with her ever since. Chris is his name. And
wow.
He, you know, but you don't do that in New York City. It's my gig. No, you don't get on my stage. This is my time. You know,
really?
You know.
Yeah.
In this city, it's like, come on, come play with us, you know?
Yeah.
Get a break. Come sing a song. You know, you don't get that in any other city. And also, part of what I'm putting together, part of the theatrical sheets will be take a guy named like Glenn Hartman, right? One of my favorite, just like keyboard players in New Orleans. Anybody says they're the best, I tell them by whose measure on what day, right? Because I can name you 10 that are great.
Sure.
Who's better that day?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say who's the best. I have a problem with the best.
Yeah.
Can't you just be great?
Subjective, yeah.
No? Because the best means everybody else is less than.
Yeah.
Right? You know, I mean, we didn't have that problem when it was Dr. John and Professor Longhair and James Booker. They all just played, you know. Now, Fess would say that you know, I forget who said it should be Booker or Byrd at the front of the parade. You know, it doesn't matter. They're both, you know.
Well, I mean, some of them were prodigies of others as well. So, I mean, the pecking order was already predetermined, you know.
Right. Yeah, but the other thing, with those guys, they all came up. I mean, Booker went to high school with Art Neville. I mean, they were, you know, so Toussaint, too. Anyway, but forget where I was going. Oh, like guys like Glenn Hartman. Go back to Glenn Hartman. He's a great keyboard player and an accordionist, right? Now he plays with, I don't know all the bands he plays with, but he plays Kings of the Small Time. Mm-hmm. He and Alex McMurray, who've been playing together for 20 years, which is a great two-man show. Just really extraordinary. An accordion and a guitar, right? And a microphone. That's it, right? Mm-hmm. He plays with Alex McMurray's band, which is a killer band. Alex is one of the great guitar players in this city and one of the great singer-songwriters. And Joe Carrara is on bass, and Carlos was on drums, and now they have different guys playing. This new show died. Great band, right? There is a band called the Klezmer All-Stars, right, which he plays in that band, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably a couple I'm missing, right? So one of my theatrical cheats will be, and I'll give this one away if anybody wants to use it. You know, I'm going to have him shot with one of the bands, but during that shot, I'm going to dissolve him. I'm going to dissolve everybody else and keep the same music going in the background, or maybe have that at a small screen, then put him playing with another band to show that this isn't the only thing he's doing.
Right.
And some of those other bands will have their own part of the series as well. So.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. Freaking Alex McMurray, I don't know how many people he plays with. You know?
There's a lot of musicians in the city that play in several bands.
George Porter.
Right.
You know, I mean, I remember I'm a member of the Threadheads, right, which was a great organization. He and Osborne, we're talking, we'll see who is playing the most gigs at Jazz Festival. They're both over 30, right? And now Anders is a little younger than George. I know George is because George is a little older than me, and I've been knowing him a long time, you know. But he plays, and he's George Porter Jr., as he always reminds me that it's George Porter Jr. You know? And but he again is a very generous musician, you know. And he's mentored a lot of cats that have come up. You know?
Sure.
And I was on a stage with him last year or the year before, Gentili stage. And his band, I've heard the Running Partners since they started, right? And they were killing it, you know. George came up, I said, man, that was great. He says, best band I've ever had. Well,
Really?
Meter's a different entity, right? But it's but that's the generosity, and people play with each other, people support each other. Give you an example about food, because that's part of what I'm putting together too, is that Paul Prudhomme was a very famous entrepreneur chef here, started Commander's Palace, started K. Paul's, his own restaurant. When he was the commander, he had an ad in the paper for somebody who wants to come work, right? And a guy who I happened to know, didn't know him then, read it, so he just didn't know what he wanted to do. He's 20 years old, and, you know, goes to interviews, and you know, Paul liked him, and he said, well, what do you want to do? He said, one day I'd like to have my own restaurant. I said, cool. He said, well, there's two things. You can be my fry cook, and I'll pay you more money, but that's all you'll do. Or I'll pay you a little bit less, and I'll teach you everything in the kitchen. Well, Frank Wrightson went on to be his sous chef and his #1 chef when they traveled to 5-1. And 7 or 8 years later, Paul Prudhomme sat down and said, okay, it's time for you to leave. And Frank tells the story. I'm not making this stuff up. And Frank said, well, he said, well, it's time to start your own restaurant, and Paul helped finance it.
Wow.
That's the city of New Orleans in a nutshell. Right?
Sure.
My favorite restaurant, one of my top favorite restaurants is Wrightson's. It's just, you know, my diet doesn't often let me eat there. I've pretty much gone plant-based for my own health, you know. But I can go there once in a while, you know, it's okay. But Frank is a very generous guy. Susan Spicer, those are the two my favorite chefs in this city. Just, there's many of them, but those are the two I've known for 40 plus years.
Sure. Say the restaurant name again. I was clear.
Wrightson's.
Wrightson's.
Wrightson's. It's in the River Bend. Very famous, you know, Chef Beard, award-winning stuff. And the other, Susan's is Bayona. And Rosedale, which is my other favorite. Plus she has Mondo at the airport, so
Gotcha.
they're busy. You know, that's a hard business, man.
Yeah.
That's a hard business. And my friend Jason Sider over here, this little seafood joint over here on Hickory in Harahan, and he has live music Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. He's a crawfish cooker. The crawfish boils at the Maple Leaf were him. Right?
Scythers?
Huh?
Scythers, is that the name
Yeah.
of it?
Yeah. I never say it right. And they have an outdoor stage over here, right? Mm-hmm. And they, last year, he's the crawfish king as far as I'm concerned in New Orleans. I mean, there'd be other royalty involved, but between what he sold live, what he cooked there, what he cooked for parties, what he cooked for Zapardos is 200,000 pounds last year.
Wow.
Man, strong. I mean, that's work. And he's a great husband, a great father, and you know, it's he's just an enjoyable character who totally loves music. I mean, absolutely love music. Awesome. A lot of great artists will play there. You know, it's like from the Tangles to Alex. Mm-hmm. You know, and the Naked Cowboys, the Desert Nudes, which is Andre Bourne, and I forget the other guys' names, but they play not country western songs. They play the cowboy songs, like Marty Robbins stuff. You know,
the time that you had spent around production at Jazz Fest, did it? What effect did it have on what you're doing now? Because I'm sure it had many facets.
Everything I've done in my life, I've always had logistics involved, right? And when you get involved in logistics, you either get better at it or worse at it, right? Mm-hmm. And watching the Jazz Festival grow, and I wasn't part of that logistical expansion, I was to a little bit, but watching how important is the expansion, how important the logistic is, how you treat people, right? What stages there's a lot of yelling on, and what stages there's not so much yelling. In my productions, if you wanted, the only person allowed to yell was me, and I wasn't yelling. If you're going to yell and swear, I look at you and go, no. Well, I work for so-and-so. Well, yeah, but you're not going to work here if you act like that. And people would straighten up pretty much, especially if you're the one writing the checks. They get real,
Sure.
they decide
That helps.
they should
Yeah.
listen, But understand, watching that thing grow from 3 stages to just when it was up to 4 or 5, and the amount of work it took, from the lowly stagehand is not lowly, he's essential, right? The guy who's pulling wires, the guys who's plugging them in, the guys rolling the amps, back when we used to hump them before we roll them, and when there's emergency, I jump in to help. When it get rained out, I work with home team to help clear the wells and stuff. The drains, all the tarps would go on the drains, and then you'd have the Acura Lake. Which people would swim in that water, and I'm like, how many bacteria are living in that water? You don't want to know. How
You're rolling the dice.
Yeah. So, but that gave me a really healthy respect for logistics. I learned a lot of the Jeds in a smaller way, right? There's a lot of people load in and load out, and you see how that goes. Yeah. Because like Taj came in there carrying a 10-piece band. He was doing his world music, and that's,
Wow. Yeah.
and then Tom, funny story. I'll tell you one last story about Tom Waits. He had his song, a postcard from a hooker in Minneapolis, right? And Jed was a nut. Jed was wild. Now, Jed did a lot of things, including starting Zoo to Do, which people don't know about. But Audubon Zoo was dump. But he got involved in that, and world-class zoo now. Anyway, so Jed and I, the late night at Jed's is where a lot of people came up from the quarter to hang out, including some of the working girls. It was a different era. It's pre-herpes, pre-A's, all that stuff.
Okay.
And they were buds because they could come hang out and listen to music at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they were done with their job for the night, right?
Sure.
Which was working girls, People would call it prostitute. I call it sporting girls, right? Anyway, and Jed says, "Man, we bet you we get one of those girls to do a burlesque during the song." And I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." Me being as crazy as Jed, right?
Well, yeah.
Close to being as crazy.
See where it goes.
So. And they're like, well, who do I got to screw? And we're like, no, you just got to do a burlesque. Oh, really? No. One time I was somebody who could do a burlesque off the spot, came all dialed up and did 2 sets and left with 2 guys. But Tom was like, you guys, we told him we were going to do this during rehearsal. He said, you're not doing that. Oh, yeah, we did that, Flipped him out, totally flipped him out.
It's funny, not too long ago I had finished Dr. John book, Under a Hoodoo Moon, and he talks about in the 70s basically an ecosystem that was unto itself, whereby people that worked the streets looked out for the club owners looked out for them, and they kind of worked hand in hand. They worked with each other as proponents of each's trade, and there weren't very many problems.
Right.
There was more street justice than there was litigation, but that's kind of healthy in itself as well, But it was funny to me to hear how well people. It sounded like they worked together. I wasn't there, obviously, but it sounded like they just worked together better back then.
Absolutely. As Bobby Dylan wrote the line, "To live outside the law, you must be honest," right? And everything's against the law when you get down to it. Having a good time, according to some people, is against the law. And did the dealers and the club owners get along? Yeah. Did the hookers and the hotels get along? Yeah. People had to be cool about what they're doing. Remember in the 70s, Lucky Pierre's was open. Lucky Pierre's was. I took my wife there. Well, we had just met. She was here for a TV convention, and I was at a guy selling my Meters and Neville shows, who I thought was her brother, turned out to be her ex-husband. And when I asked him if elevators are, and if I went out with his sister, he says, I don't know, I don't have a sister, but you can go out with my wife if you wanted to. I'm like, oh, but they've been apart for several years.
Okay.
Ended up marrying her. But we don't want to go out to eat something at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we went to Lucky's, right? We're sitting at a big round table with about eight or nine people. And one of her girlfriends said, well, what are all those pretty girls doing at the bar? And Andrea was a pretty smart cookie, and she said, oh, I think they're working.
By the way.
Yeah, they were. That's what they were there for, And but that was the 70s. I mean, Lucky's was there. I mean, first time I went into Lucky, Frankie Ford is playing House of the Rising Sun in the front bar and piano. I'm like,
what?
I think I found the place.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's, I moved back here from Miami about Coconut Grove about 3 years ago. And I've been back and forth the whole time. I mean, I would spend a quarter of the year here anyway. And my heart's always here. Like Chris Rose says, New Orleans is the only city who lives in you,
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to come back, and I sing that song since I've been 15 years old, Going back to spend my days in the House of the Rising Sun,
Yeah.
And I knew I needed to come home, and this is home to me, I got here in 1970, and my spirit never really left. I was back in New York for 9 years, and in Manhattan, and then Brooklyn, did HBO specials, but I'm down here doing them, right? And then we all moved back here with my family, and then we moved to South Florida, but I was still here all the time,
Yeah. Sure.
My son was, he heard he had crawfish and the Neville brothers in utero, right? And my wife was at that time, whatever May is to August, that he was born in August, so she was pregnant with him.
Mm-hmm.
And eating crawfish and dancing to the Neville brothers. So he didn't have a prayer not liking his music.
Exactly, Yeah.
He's now a Navy commander, which is a big deal, but he's got a great musical taste. So
Sure.
started out, pre-breath,
It was
so
predetermined, yeah.
Predetermined.
You had mentioned the HBO special and I believe Lifetime too. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I shot the Meters and Devils in '80, right? And I ended up moving to New York and working in the TV and film business, more in the film distribution business, learning that business, but all the time still in music, still back and forth to down here.
The Meters in the 80s was Jazz Fest. You were working at Jazz Fest too?
No. I was working in New York City.
Oh, okay.
But I was down here all the time, going to Jazz Fest and
Gotcha.
hanging out with my gang there. We've had a gang for a long time there. A lot of them are faded away. A lot of them died. There's a few of us left, right?
Sure.
The old school Jazz Festers were part of that gang, right? Alan Langhoff and Malone and, and the whole gang. Anyway, and what happened was that my wife worked for HBO, but in distribution, right?
Okay.
And I heard the scuttlebutt that they wanted to do something putting great talent together and having them play live, right?
No known region? It was just anywhere?
No, whoever could put together the shows.
Okay.
And they did one with Carl Perkins, but it wasn't a session. It was kind of like a bunch of guitar players playing, on folding chairs, and it was okay, but it was... And so they wanted a real cinematic session series. And I had Fats Domino and Jerry Lee Lewis in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the first inaugural Rock and Roll Hall of Fame dinner, sitting with them. And there's Ray and there's Keith, and I'm like, I wanted Keith to play it, but Keith was like, I can't do it because he'd been here too long. He couldn't come back that quick. He would lose his tax status, right?
Keith who?
Keith Richards from the Stones.
Losing his tax status.
But he
working
said,
in the States, gotcha.
Yeah. But he said, Woody will do it. So little I didn't know then that Woody had run into Jerry Lee when he was like 14 years old, when Jerry Lee was big, when he got busted having married his 14-year-old cousin and all that stuff. And Paul Schaefer was somebody I peripherally knew. And so I pitched it to HBO with Fats and Jerry Lee, and they were real interested, and they were like, well, who else can you get? And I'm like, who do you want? And they were like, well, how about Ray Charles? And I'm like, little did I know that was about the hardest get in the business, right? Because Ray's manager, Mr. Jones, was the guy in the movie who became his partner. And he was his partner, right? And I, called him up. Very politely said no. I said, okay. But as a producer, you have to learn to get around the agents and the managers, right?
Right. Yeah.
And there was a guy named Roy Gaines who played with the Jazz Crusaders, and he played with Ray for 10 years, right? And we had a connection to him. And I said, do this, and you get to play on a gig, get a good associate producer credit and a little fee, And he went to Ray, his house, and said, Ray, they're doing a tribute to Fats Domino. Will you play at it? And Ray said, yeah, good. I'll do it. Call my manager. So now I'm calling up Joe Adams again. I said, Joe Adams is his name. I said, oh. He said, yeah, I heard. But Joe Adams was always straight with me. He was always fair with me.
Yeah. When
I went to him 10 years later to re-up the video rights, he didn't have to do it, or he could have held me up, and he didn't. One of the best compliments I ever had is he said, we always loved this. Ray was already dead. He said, we always loved this show. I'll give it to you standard, 10 cents a DVD, which is like, freaking Ray Charles. But anyway, then I put together the band, and with Paul Schaefer and Ronnie Wood, Dave Cowens? No, it's not Dave Cowens. Cowens, he's the bass player for Bee Gees and Streisand. He lived out there in the country outside of Baton Rouge. And Smokey was supposed to play drums for us, but he just couldn't, he was stuck in New Orleans music. He played with Fats, and then we brought in Steve Jordan. And so we had Roy Gaines and Ronnie Wood on guitar. And it was an amazing show. We kind of pulled that out, by the seat of my pants, flying pretty blind, and my feeling to this day is that the gods of music made that happen.
Sure.
Because what does a 30-year-old producer do when Ray Charles walks off the stage? Yeah, I'm going to sue you. Yeah, right. His lawyers would eat my lawyers for breakfast. Yeah. Right? You just, you got to have a lot of power to come up against somebody like that. But they did. They played, And in truth, it was Paul Schaefer, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Ronnie Wood who held that show together.
Yeah.
Hard to believe. It was Ronnie's 40th birthday, right? And they came to work. Jerry Lee's wife was acting up. He sent her back to Nashville. They came to play, which was just a great thing. And it was a big success. Rave reviews in the New York Times. And then I did a big jazz show here with Sarah Vaughan and my man Al Hurt, Dizzy Gillespie, and Maynard Ferguson, and Chuck Mangione, with Hancock, Carter, and Higgins as the band. That's Miles Davis Quartet.
Wow, yeah.
Now, Sarah brought her trio, but then she played, and it was, she and Diz did Around Midnight a cappella, and she apologized to me the next day that she scattered it, right? She said, I'm so sorry. I got up there, I sang the song 1,000 times, and I forgot the opening verse.
Yeah.
So once you start scatting, I said, Sarah, it's great. She became a friend. So,
well, improv is magical. The HBO special, what was the name of it?
There was two. There was Fats and Friends, Fats Domino and Friends.
Okay.
There was Sass and Brass. And the last one I did for them, which is last of the series, was Caliente o Ay Picante, hot and spicy, or Latin series, Latin session.
Okay.
I shot that in L.A. That was a good show too. That was Santana, Ruben Blades, Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, Jerry Garcia.
Beautiful.
And Linda Ronstadt, but she only gave me TV. She never gave anybody video ever. So and that was okay. That's Linda. A lot of respect for her. So,
the first one that came out, the tribute to Fats, what year are we talking? You said it was early 80s, huh? Oh, okay.
86 or 87 when it came out. I think it was 86. 86, yeah.
Because it was a big hit.
It was a big hit.
I was also going to point out how strong HBO was at that time. HBO
they
was,
were putting the money into music.
yeah,
You know,
not only music, but I mean comedy too. They had their own comedy specials with, with big names, you know.
Yeah, well, Michael Fuchs was running it then, and Fuchs, it's like Absolutely Fabulous was pitched to the departments, and they turned it down. And somebody got to Michael. Michael said, "No, we're buying that," which was absolute success for them.
Mm-hmm.
In the sessions, you know, I go talk with him, you know, and you know, I'm just a little low life, mild, small producer. They're playing a pretty big game, you know, and he'd tell me how much they loved it. You know, Chris Albrecht would send me notes from California. He was in charge. He was the guy who green-lighted Sopranos, for Christ's sakes. You know, and they're like, man, you do a great job. You know.
Yeah.
That was a guy who'd rocked the boat a lot, but you know, we made great programming, which was, again, the artists. You know, and also my crew. No, that's the other thing. You say back how to learn production, and you learn how important everybody is. You know, the sound guy, the guy pulling the wires. You know, the guy. Doing the catering, all that stuff makes the troop work. It's like an army. You got to feed an army. You got to respect the army, right? And when you start doing that for real, I mean, I'd have 100 people working for me. I'd have like 5, and then it would go up to like 15, and then there'd be the 2-week period where it's full on, and then it tapers down.
Yeah.
But you have to set the attitude and have the people with you. My crew, Len Delamico directed everything I've ever done from 1980 to 1984. Tom Dukie was my quote-unquote technical director, but he was always my co-producer, right? He retired as chief engineer for MSNBC. Veronica Loza was my editor and camerawoman, right? Juan Barrera was one of my handheld camera guys. He did NFL sidelines to stay in shape, right? And this crew was, you know, they came out of Capitol Theater, which shot 200 shows in black and white New Jersey. They shot Springsteen before anybody knew who he was. They did, if you looked up, their show with Warren Zevon was just like on fire, you know. I mean, so they had done this starting out with really terrible little black and white cameras. So they had evolved organically that way. So they in fact, when I came out of the building with Len and Tom, my director, my line producer, after meeting with HBO, they wanted to meet my production team. And we're sitting on the sidewalk, and I forget which one said, I think it was Len. He said, David, how did you get them to pay us to do what we've always wanted to do?
Yeah.
Which was what was our dream, to do something like that.
Sure.
And why I got in was the big boy producers, one who were doing Dolly Parton and, you know, is that they went on the road. They knew every star turn. They knew every joke was coming. They plot the cameras before the show, right? You knew what was going to happen. And they didn't want to touch this thing, $500,000 budget, and it was going to be like them playing. And so you had to catch it. I mean, we did 2 shows in the same night. That was my only safety net.
Okay.
It's not much of a net, but and then the final product, we cut between the 2 shows. But it was really that I had that energy, right? That we wanted to do it. We cared about it. I turned down shows later in my career that were music I just didn't really appreciate. It was fine.
Personal taste?
Personal taste.
Yeah.
And, you know, successful. Some of the real amped up country, you know, overproduced country stuff, you know. It just wasn't wasn't fair to them for me to do it, you know. But you know, the crew is, like I said, back to logistics, you know. There was other people involved that were like chief roadies almost. They were productions assistants, or you give a prize, best boy and key grip, right? Those are 2 things that producer assigns, right? And one of those, our first show, was Michelle Nugent, who went on to run the Food at the Jazz Festival for 30 years. Nice. That's a woman who knows logistics. You know? She and I just she keeps shoveling work on people, and the ones who do it and rise up, you just keep giving them more work, and you promote them and give them more money, and just see how long they'll work for you.
Sure.
You know? So, but it's all about a team. I mean, you know, yeah, I made those shows, but that's a big I. It's like we made those shows.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I had the same lighting director for all of them, Moisey, right? And if any of them fell over dead, I could do their job about half as good as they did it. But I could do it.
That's the way it goes, yeah.
But I would kick Veronica out of one chair and put her in the director's chair, and I'd sat in the AD's chair, you know. But I didn't have to do that. These guys were pros, you know.
These people, what were the releases for the string of HBO features? They must have been in close succession to be able to retain such a large team throughout the entirety of
they worked for a lot of people, but Lennon went on to work for the Grateful Dead for a long, long time, and he got that gig after we did the Meters and Neville show, right? Video support, but and shot a lot of stuff for them.
Gotcha.
But my continuity was really just the relationships we had. There was no contractual relationship. It was, other than the fact I wasn't going to do a show without them.
Yeah.
You know, it was, and we knew that. And it's funny. They'd call me Dad, and we're all the same age, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't want their job, and they didn't want my job.
Yeah.
You know, because when you're executive producer, you're juggling. You know, you may have a big ego, but you better put it in your back pocket, because I got a superstar over here, I got a client over here, I got an audience over here, I get this guy's manager who's like a little bit of a pain in the ass. But you got to shoot the show, you know. Really, I kind of looked at it. My job was to get them all on stage at the same time, and then I'd turn it over to my crew. I'd light the fuse and say, okay, shoot it. Now, I was in Fats and Friends because we needed interstitial footage, and we ended up shooting all these scenes at the bar. And wardrobe dressed me up as a bartender, and I have a little name tag, David,
nice.
and Paul had a great solace that I was right there doing that. I had a set of cans underneath the bar, you know, and I'd sit there and be talking with Fats and Jerry Lee, and you know, it was pretty interesting. It was a wild night.
Yeah,
wild night.
What did it? I guess, in your opinion, or maybe factually, what did it enable you to do moving forward? Because I mean, you establish an immeasurable amount of credit with people that maybe didn't know your name before. You know what I'm saying? I'm
still on that credit to some degree. And that credit was like with musicians. Musicians, they want to get paid, but what they really care about is you treat their music well, right? And some of the other producers of television were okay with that. It was business, though, you know. And no, I'm only going to spend $20,000 on post-production. I'm not going to spend 50. I'd spend the 50. And I'd put the money into the mix, you know, and excuse me, not just slap together a hot edit, you know.
Sure.
And well, visuals most people pay attention to, but not so much the sound. And because I was a musician, right?
It mattered to you.
It mattered to me, you know. I'd been on that stage, you know, not on those stages those guys rose to, but I'd been on a stage in front of people, right? And it mattered. That was what was important, was the sound. And that's carried me to this day. You know, I call Book Ron Carter, and he's like, okay, who am I playing with? He didn't care about the money. Money was fine. I said, well, your old band. He said, what old band? I said, well, Hancock and Billy Higgins. He says, okay, whatever I got to do, I'm there, you know. And I had to buy a seat for his damn bass, you know, but that was part of the deal, you know. Wonderful character. It still is to this day, Ron Carter. One of the giants of the stand-up bass, you know. But it's really about caring about the music, and that gave me a lot of credibility. When I finished that series, I had some other things going on. I developed a bunch of scripts and went down that rabbit hole, and kind of got out for a while, because, you know, when it's not happening, you better find another way to make a living, because it's very sporadic, you know. And I made some big mistakes. There was my drinking was one. The other one was that I had, you know, when you get into those positions when you're younger, you got to do it all yourself. You got to figure it all out, right?
Absolutely.
And there was older, wiser people that were available to me, and they didn't want anything. They would have been happy to help me. But I did not know enough to ask for help, right? Or, can anybody take a look at what I'm doing and see if, you know, like, for instance, be pitching other networks in the middle of your show. That's when you're supposed to pitch, not when it's done, because that's when you're hot.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I gave MTV the Unplugged series because they weren't going to pay me enough money. So I told Tom Fursten the concept. He was president at the time. And I, you know, do it. You know, I should have done it. You know, but it's really, you grow. You know, and the music business is like the mafia. You never get out. You know, unless you don't care. Unless you don't care about it, right?
Yeah, sure.
You know, and I've always cared about it. I've always cared about these musicians here. And some of them do well. A lot of them struggle. A lot of them play a lot of gigs to put bread on the table, and that's one of the reasons that I'm kind of back in the game. You know, working on a combination of the music, the food, the beauty of the city.
Yeah.
Not just throw me some beads, mister. You know.
Sure.
And it's here. You know, I have some other major hooks to go in it that would allow companies to fund it. Because I learned a long time ago with Meters and Devils, you don't make it on spec. You have to have a contract. You have to have somebody who's going to, whether you're going to stream it or broadcast it, they got to pay a significant part of the budget, right? Or else you better not make it. You know, you Deacon John, you can go out and make a beautiful show, but it wasn't made here. You know, they didn't have the ability to build a PR for it. They didn't have a time slot for it. So one of the existing is a series, so you can have its own time slot.
Well, frame it up for us. What's the proper title, and you know,
working title is There Will Be Dancing.
There Will Be Dancing. All right.
Yeah.
You're giving us bits and pieces, but you know, what does it encompass? What is its focal point or points?
Focal point is let the world know why every major musician in the planet comes to New Orleans to learn.
Okay.
That the music that they know from the Stones, I mean, the one thing about the English cats is they always gave us credit for the music. You know?
Absolutely.
You know, where the root of that music is. And we're it. You know, it's like Dylan. You know, he loves a lot of cities. He likes New Orleans the best.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Also, one of my other favorite quotes is, the devil came to New Orleans and he sighed, which I just think is, it's ironic enough for me. Let me put it that way. You know? And, you know, whether it's Elton John or McCartney or it's Santana, any of them, you know. And, you know, who doesn't love coming to New Orleans? Who doesn't love our food and our music, right? But we need to get them paid better for it.
Sure.
You know, and give them a way to, it's like Thread has to put out, 100 CDs. And most all of them have paid back the money for doing it, but they didn't make any money, you know, right?
Right.
You know, you're going to give you $5-10 grand to make something, but, you know, where's the other 10 grand to promote it? It's also a problem. How do you promote something these days? That's a whole other kettle of fish, you know.
Yeah, that's a shotgun pattern. So
So you get a TV series like I'm trying to do. That's how you promote it, you know.
Sure. So you're basically establishing value and kind of raising awareness. It's an overused term, but you're establishing value and kind of illustrating the hows and whys of not just heritage in general, music, food,
right?
The influences. Yeah. Does it start in the past? I mean, how do you go about doing this? Do you start present day, or do you touch on the roots? I mean, you have to touch on the roots.
Present day, people playing.
Okay.
But then you cut back to the history. You know?
So there's a bit of the why.
I mean, here it is. Boom. You know.
Yeah.
You know, but then you go to the why. You know, and then you go to the joy, food. You know, then you come back to the music, and you roll credits.
Yeah.
You know,
I think a lot of people that come down here are wowed initially, and they don't know what's behind it all.
Yeah.
There's more behind it, you know.
Well, you talk to artists like David Torkanowski or John Cleary, and they know the history here. I mean, there's dozens of artists who do, but there can be they're articulate about it, you know.
Sure.
I mean, some of the characters involved in our music scene here, the director of music at OZ is a very knowledgeable cat. You know, it's jazz festival folks. You know, the production folks that have been there a long time. You know, they know the good times and the bad times. You
Sure.
know? And I hope to bring as much of that to the forefront as we can. You know, it's But then again, somebody's got to pay for it, you know?
Yeah.
So I try to do that. Oh, I'll call my honey back, you know?
I was talking to Chris Berry not too long ago, who is on the board for the Louisiana Music and Heritage Museum that's kind of being spec'd out and hopefully will be coming to fruition in the next couple of years. And it struck a chord with me because I had recently went to Stax recording studio, which is a museum now in Memphis, and they take the time to, before you walk through and see all of these artifacts and kind of get dazzled by the different things, the cars and costumes and audio equipment and all this stuff, they take the time to sit you down and give you a short, curated presentation that gives you an understanding of what you're about to see before you see it. And I think that the Louisiana Music and Heritage Museum is going to do the same thing.
Right. I may steal some of that myself.
Effectively. Yeah. And I feel like shows like yours accomplish that effectively because it's something that needs to be pointed out. It's not just come down to Mardi Gras. For so many years when I was younger, that's all I did was just go get shit-faced, and because it's Mardi Gras, and I don't even know what the hell it is, but let's get shit-faced. And I think people kind of use this as a tourist attraction just to get blitzed. And, you know, maybe they get to see the sights, maybe they don't, but they don't realize there's hundreds of years behind what you're looking at. Yeah. You know, it could be something as simple as the design of that mask.
Mardi Gras Indians, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to have shows like you're talking about that illustrate these things and kind of lay it out for people to give it more importance, more social relevance, you know?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it, as it progresses down the road, I'll give you a call. We can do some more talk about it. I mean, I like that curated synopsis. It may have to be a link you can go to on the if it's streaming. You say, okay, here's a background on this.
Sure.
On this show of the series. You know? And that gives you some other room. It's also for streamers. They want audience. You know. Murdoch, who I loathe, actually, Rupert Murdoch, but he did, unfortunately, very smart man, said, you know, content is king, you know, and we need more positive content. I'm very disappointed by most music stuff. It's really shot poorly, or they don't, you can tell they don't give a shit, or they didn't put the budget into it, you know.
You talking about visual production?
Yeah, like a lot of stuff done at the White House, you know. Some of them have done good. Some of them, like, God, you know, you cut in a voiceover for the bathroom, you know, somebody introducing somebody, and they don't even match it's not that hard to match the sound in the room. You can do it, you know.
Yeah.
Nah, it's just cheaper to do that. I'm like,
you
know, you got Buddy Guy playing, and you're gonna, you know, just not. But that's one producer who's done a lot of shows, and I give him a lot of credit in some ways. But you know, he should have hired me to be his co-producer. You know?
That's funny that you mentioned that because I kind of associate it more so with musicians. Let's say I'm talking to a bassist, and we touch on how once he's playing bass for a while, it becomes a lens with which to see the world differently because you can listen to that song as a listener for the song as a whole, or he can go back and listen to it, and all of a sudden, all he hears is the bass. Do you see what I'm saying? So as someone in production, does that have the same effect on you after years of producing shows? Do you start to see past the storyline and into the production value, I guess?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's like for me, you know, you see a lot of stuff that's done well. It's on YouTube and other things. And you can see how much of it is pseudo live, but it's pretty canned. They're not playing the track, but they rehearse this and the little jokes they do, you know.
I prefer. I mean, they're just kind of laboring over making something seem natural. I don't like that.
But then again, there's ones who do it well, You know, thinking Bonnie Raitt with Kev Mo. You know, it's like, but their music speaks louder than their words.
Sure.
You know, and they kind of just have to do a little bit of banter, and then they go for it. But Bonnie's Bonnie. Bonnie's great. You know, and you know, I've been a fan of hers for, I don't know, 40 years or something like that. You know, but it's all about caring about the music and finding a way. I mean, I look for the gods of music to help me out here. You know, they helped me out before. It's time I ring that bell again. You know,
Sure.
and say I'm ringing it right now, hard. You know, it's like, and I have a feeling it's going to happen. Things are falling in place. People are falling in place.
Yeah.
And you know, I haven't won the lottery, so you know,
I
just
can't
have
seem
make
to do
some
that
shows,
either.
you know?
I don't know. I'm speechless when it comes to that. Is there any kind of timeline or prospectus that we can
I'd
look
like
for
to
things
pitch the show to the powers that be. Either in the times to pitch it is either now through November and then January, February, like that.
Yeah.
For the buyers, you know, it used to be traditionally that way in television, but it still kind of goes on that, you know, and ebbs and flow of the industry, you know. So I hope to carry the ball a little bit further down the road this month to where it's actually a presentable wish to put out there.
Sure.
You know, you really want to do this, I'll put more of it together for you. But I can't commit artists until I pay artists, you know.
Sure.
And the same with different celebrities that I want to have involved in it to bring the hook in, you know.
Sure.
And why they go to New Orleans and why you should, you know.
Absolutely.
And those of us here, why you should get out and hear the music. I love the more places are playing early shows, you know. I mean, yeah, you're going to have the college crowd. They want to go out 10, 11 o'clock and drinking, and that's cool. That's how you make money.
Yeah.
But you look at places like, you know, anywhere from the Maple Leaf to Chiquiwawa, you know, that 6 to 8, 8 to 10, you know, 7 to 9. Those shows, you got a lot of people who can go those shows. You got family, you got jobs.
Sure.
But, you know, they want to hear the music, but you got to make it available for them in a system and in a way they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
On this show, there will be dancing, correct?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can see early on that you're going to be scouting or looking for? Anybody that might be listening now, from
Locations?
musicians to people that find anything,
Yeah.
anything, if you want to put it out there.
Yeah, I do need to tie into Lafayette. I want to do the Cajun. You know, I was very lucky to be here, Clifton Chenier at Jay's Lounge and Cockpit back in the early 70s, which was really a cool thing. Didn't know how cool it was until later, you know?
Absolutely.
But that's the only thing really outside of this area. Although people like Marcia Ball, she was born on the border, so she's one of us, you know?
Sure.
People who can bring things to the table. I am looking at the tourist board. I am looking at the hotel association, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Some of those people are smart enough to know it's like, we get more people to come, it'll do us all good. Instead of, well, come, but you got to come stay at the X Hotel. You know, no, just come here. We'll find a way for you. You know, and the same with the restaurants. You know, it's nobody's put to my knowledge, nobody's put together something that would be easily and kosher for a lot of those entities to get behind without the tail wagging the dog. All right. Not going to make it, so I'm doing it in X Hotel's ballroom with the Hilton or the Hyatt or any of the other ones. I don't mind showing them, you know. There's some of the jazz they put on is pretty cool, you know. But it's really it's really the underneath here. It's really where the real music is.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the point. Columns Hotel is doing great stuff, right? And I can shoot in that place, you know. Things have gotten smaller. I don't have to bring in a $300,000 Kagami that's as big as this couch, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to do that. So.
Sure.
But I get to get on down the road, buddy. It's been
Thank
a
you for your
pleasure,
time, man. I do appreciate it.
I got you. I think you're just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. All of us, right?
Yeah. That's the point.
Sure.
Why does George keep playing? Because he can.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's good at it, you know? Now, there's artists that need to hang it up, you know? It gets to a point, if you can't do it, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's one thing we learned from Otis Spine. Last story, we're doing this in the basement of this place in Cambridge or Boston, and he's working with this band. He's playing with us and stuff, you know? And he says, okay, what do you do if you're supposed to play and you just don't have it? Right? You just don't have it. And Brendan, really, our consensus, well, you go do the best you can. He says, no. If you don't have it, don't do it. Give somebody else a chance. You go up and do it.
Yeah.
You know? If you can't bring it, it's one of the reasons I term, you know, how about Papa Molly? Oh, he can bring it. What about Sanchez? He can bring it. You know, what about the Trumpet Mafia? You know, there's so many acts in this town. I can do 50 of these shows and keep going.
Out of respect for the craft.
Because then those 50 bands will create 50 more bands. It's like Jazz Festival. How many bands can I create? You know.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's good. But I got to get going, buddy.
All right,
People
thank you,
waiting
man.
on me, and I appreciate it.
Oh, look at all these buttons. Give me some of this. And, oh, hey, look at that. I like that one, too. That's nice. And thumbs up, everybody. I want everybody to have a thumb. And I like sharing.